Welcome to Dash and Dish. Today I'm getting personal and I'm sharing my journey through eating disorders and how God turned the ashes in my life into something beautiful. Today's menu includes decadent Triple Chocolate Chunk Muffins, Honey Nut Cheerio Chicken with everything cauliflower, noodle-free lasagna full of traditional flavors with a surprise ingredient, and for dessert, chocolate-covered strawberry frozen yogurt. I'm sharing the very start of Dash and Dish with all the foods we crave coming up. My story began when I was about 14 years old. We moved from a really big city to a little small town. And when you're 14, everything just seems unknown, you're unsure of who you are. And so it was my first day of school at a middle school, and I remember going to the lunchroom, and it was my first time trying to find someone to sit with. There was a group of boys across the lunchroom, and all of them began to look at me and talk, and one of them approached me. And he handed me a note that was folded up, and he said, "Just in case you don't know, this is what you look like." So I began to open up the piece of paper, and as I did, I saw a drawing on it. And it was a picture of a really grotesque, overweight, just totally terrible image that was drawn of me. And it reflected no truth in it, but to me, it became my truth. And so at that moment, I began to see my body in a whole new way. And I began to think of different ways that I could lose weight. And so I started to pay attention to any piece of diet culture or any type of diet tips that I could find. And so I started to cut out different food groups one by one, and I began to eat less and less. And I remember there was one day that I came home and I saw a pan of brownies, and of course I was completely starved at this time. I had gone about 2 years not eating much more than a granola bar or an orange each day. And so I was going up to the pan of brownies, and I had heard or I saw a movie where some young girls were eating pizza and they were having a party, and they said, you know, if you just simply do this, you can get rid of all the food that you just ate. And so I thought, well, let me try that. And so anorexia turned into bulimia, and I carried on with that for about another 2 years. It wasn't until my 18th birthday that my sisters called me out. They had an intervention from me, so to speak. I just got done actually eating my birthday cake, and I went to the bathroom. And then shortly after, they called me upstairs and they said, "Katie, we need to talk to you." And so they looked me in the eye and they said, "Katie, we know what you're doing." And tears started to stream down their face. And I realized in that moment what I was actually putting my sisters through. And all the while, looking back, I remember either feeling completely numb or completely helpless to change. And so I just said, you know what, I really want to change, I just don't know how. Will you guys pray with me? And so that moment, we joined hands and we prayed together. And I truly believe that God did a deep work that only He can do in my heart. So that began a quest and a journey for me to find out who I was in Christ. And the more that I began to pursue God, the more I began to find Him. And the more I began to find Him, the more I understood who I was in Him. And that revelation of knowing my worth, my value, my identity in Christ is what truly changed me from the inside out, in only a way that God can. And I can see now how God has taken all of the pain of my past and the things that I would consider ashes that no one could reconstruct. And I see how God has put them back together and made something beautiful. And that's why I truly believe that Dash and Dish is a place where God turned my ashes into true beauty. Okay, so today we're starting with a chocolate chunk muffin that basically tastes like a cross between a muffin and a brownie. So it's moist and delicious, and it doesn't have any flour, sugar, or butter in it. And actually all the recipes that we're gonna be making today, these were the recipes that I started Dashing Dish with, and they tend to be one of the most popular still. So we're gonna be covering a lot of the classics from Dashing Dish today. So to the blender, I added 1 cup of water, 1/2 cup of applesauce, 1/2 cup of Greek yogurt, and 3 egg whites. So now I'm gonna start with my dry ingredients, and I have cocoa powder here, and I'm gonna do 3/4 cup of cocoa powder. And the cocoa powder makes these muffins really rich and dense, almost like a brownie, and you wouldn't expect that cocoa powder would do that, but it really does add a lot of richness. And the nice thing about cocoa powder is it gives you that chocolate flavor without a lot of sugar and butter and all of the other yummy things that we know in chocolate. And then we have 1 3/4 cup of oats. And 1/2 cup of sweetener. With sweetener, if you've seen Dashing Dish cooking shows before, you know that I tell you you can use any kind of sweetener you like. Personally, I use monk fruit sweetener or stevia. I also like coconut sugar and sugar in the raw. So whatever works for you, just choose a dry, granulated sweetener for this recipe. Then I have 1½ teaspoon of baking powder and 1½ teaspoon of baking soda, and 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Then I'm just gonna cover the blender and I'm gonna go ahead and blend this all up. All right, you just wanna blend that until it's completely smooth. You won't even know that there's oats in there at all because it's gonna be completely blended in, so it's more like a flour. And then I'm gonna take my trusty ice cream scoop here, which is really nice for muffins. It makes them the perfect size and it's an easy release. So I use that whenever I make muffins. And I'm just gonna go ahead and scoop this in. This batter is gonna look really thin, but trust me, it turns out perfectly every time. And when I actually created this recipe, it was one of the first recipes that made me realize how different I felt when I went from that sugary white flour muffin that I bought from a grocery store freezer to making my own using whole grains. So in this case, it was the oatmeal. And I felt so much better. I didn't have an energy slump midway throughout my day. And I realized, wow, when I cut out the sugar and the flour, I feel so much better. And that was when I really started to have a healthier relationship with food. It was when I started to focus on how food makes me feel rather than eating healthy or eating a low-fat or a low-calorie food just to lose weight or just to fit into a certain size jeans. My motive was then turned into, how can I feel my very best? And that became my focus. And ultimately, that led me to desiring to glorify God with my body. And I think a lot of times we forget that, you know, we only get one body. And how we treat it, how we steward over it is so important. And if we make good choices and we fuel our body with real food, the way that God intended, we're gonna feel our best. And that allows us to be a really good steward over what He's given us and also bring Him glory because we have energy and strength to be able to do all that we're called to do. So I'm just gonna finish filling these muffin tins here. Okay, so now I'm gonna tap these with chocolate chips, and this is my favorite part. When I created this recipe, I called it Triple Chocolate Chunk Muffins because I actually did the chocolate chips and chocolate squares in the middle of the chocolate muffin, but now it's just gonna be a double chocolate muffin because we're just gonna do the chocolate with the chocolate chips. All right, so these look perfect. I did about 1/2 cup of chocolate chips, but you can measure those however you want. You don't really necessarily have to measure those out. Now I'm just gonna pop these into the oven, 350 degrees for about 20 minutes or until a toothpick comes out clean. And coming up next, I'm gonna make one of my daughter and husband's personal favorite, Honey Nut Cheerio Chicken.
Segment 6.
Whoa, what just happened?
What just happened? Oh. Stop.
I don't know. Hold on a second. Let me figure out what I just did.
Segment 6, take 2.
So we're gonna make one of my husband and 3-year-old's favorites, which is our Honey Nut Cheerio Chicken, and it has 3 ingredients. So if you have 3 ingredients on hand, you can make this and you never have to buy frozen chicken nuggets again. So I just have some chicken breast, some Honey Nut Cheerios, and some honey, and that's all you need. So you could technically do this with any kind of cereal or any kind of crunchy coating that you want. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna move our chicken over just for a minute, and I'm going to take our cereal in a Ziploc bag and I'm gonna pound it out using a meat pounder. And you don't have to get this perfect, but what you do want is you wanna get it kind of crushed up, almost like a breadcrumb texture or consistency. Is consistency a good word for a dry ingredient? I don't know. This is one of those recipes that you can have your kids or your husband make with you, and it's a lot of fun. So I didn't really measure out the cereal. You can just kind of eyeball it to see, will this coat all of the chicken? But I think I have about 2 cups of cereal in here. So let's say you have some leftover cereal, then this is a really good way to use it up as well. So you can see I have a few little pieces of Cheerios still, and that's okay. What is important is to have some of the coating that's fine enough to grab onto the chicken when you coat it. Then in another bowl, I'm gonna do about a cup of honey. And what I like about using honey is you don't need to use raw egg whites at all. So if you have an egg allergy in your house, honey is the perfect way to get the coating to stick onto the chicken. And it gives a lot of flavor as well. So I have my 2 coatings there. I'm just gonna go ahead and cut up this chicken. And I use kitchen scissors or kitchen shears to cut my chicken. I don't use a knife and a cutting board. First of all, you only get one thing dirty this way, but also it's just quicker and easier. Sometimes I'll even take my kitchen scissors and I'll kind of just cut things up into the bowl. Okay, so now I'm gonna spray a sheet pan with cooking spray. And I have a rack here. If you have one of these, great. You probably have had it for forever. It came with the pan a lot of times, and you've never used it and thought, what is this for? Well, this is a perfect recipe to use one of your racks. It's not just for cooling things. And the reason why is this rack will help the chicken to get crispy the whole way around, rather than just putting it flat on the pan, which you could do. But a lot of times you'll have that soggy underneath. But if you have a pan, it allows the heat to circulate and it'll get crispy and crunchy on every bite of chicken. So now I'm gonna start by coating the chicken, and you can do a few pieces at a time. This is how I cook at home. I get it done quick. In fact, a lot of times when I'm feeding my whole family, so like my mom, my dad, my sisters, my mom is always remarking, gosh, Katie, you're so fast in the kitchen. But you know, I look for these shortcuts. I'm all about just getting things done quickly and having healthy, flavorful meals when everybody's hungry in as short a time as possible. So I'm gonna go ahead and finish breading the rest of these chicken nuggets. Then I'll pop them in the oven, 375 degrees for about 10 to 15 minutes or until they're golden brown on top. One of my favorite simple side dishes that can be cooked alongside the Cheerio chicken nuggets or any of your favorite meals is my roasted everything seasoned cauliflower. First, I preheat the oven to 425 degrees. I spread the cauliflower florets evenly on the tray and spray with good quality cooking spray. I sprinkle over the Parmesan cheese and everything bagel seasoning and spray again to ensure the top gets golden brown and the seasonings stick to the veggies. I place the sheet pan in the hot oven and roast the cauliflower for 20 to 25 minutes or until the veggies are roasted and the Parmesan cheese is golden on top. Coming up next, who doesn't love comfort food, and nothing is better than lasagna. Don't miss this veggie-filled noodleless variation with all the wonderful traditional flavors. Lasagna is the ultimate comfort food to me. In fact, I remember on Sundays growing up, my mom would always make a lasagna and we'd have it family style around the table with everybody there. So this just reminds me of home and my mom. And one of the great things about this is it actually doesn't contain any pasta. It's a noodleless lasagna. So here's how I make it. I start with, of course, all the different layers you have to have, the meat layer. So if you want to do this without meat, you could. You just leave out the meat and you can just add the veggies to the sauce. So I browned up a little bit of ground turkey. You could do beef or ground chicken, whatever you like, or you could just do without it, like I said. So I'm just gonna kind of stir this in. I also have a diced onion in here with the meat that I started to just cook off with the meat. However, you could leave that out as well. I know a lot of people don't like onions, so it's just really for added flavor. You don't necessarily need it. Then I have 1 head of cauliflower and 1 head of broccoli. And actually I did a little shortcut. I just microwaved some frozen broccoli and some cauliflower. And I just put it into a bowl to steam it in the microwave, but you could use fresh as well and just steam it in the microwave or on a stovetop. And now I'm just taking my kitchen shears and I'm cutting it up so it's a little bit smaller in size. You don't want really big pieces of veggies in there, or it's gonna kind of take away from the texture of the different layers. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Now I'm gonna add the veggies into the pan with my meat. And then I'm just gonna give this a good stir. And I do have the heat over medium heat. So after I brown the turkey, I just keep it on medium heat. And this will kind of cook off any excess water in the veggies. Okay, so now that these are kind of cooking off in the water, I'm gonna add my seasonings. So I'm gonna do a 1/2 teaspoon of salt, about a 1/2 teaspoon of pepper, 1 teaspoon of garlic powder, and a good heaping teaspoon or 2 of Italian seasoning. And then we have 1 jar of marinara sauce. Now, if you like a really saucy lasagna, you could do a 1.5 jars, or you could do even 2 jars. So this is looking good. This is our meat sauce that's coming together. And as we all know, lasagna has different layers. So we're gonna be adding 2 more layers to this lasagna. And I said that this lasagna reminds me of my mom. And the funny thing is this is actually my mom's all-time favorite recipe on Dashing Dish. So when I created it, I wanna say like 12 years ago. She asked me for it when she had a surgery. And then any time since then, I've had a chance to cook for her and bring food over to her house. This is the #1 thing that she asked for. Your noodleless lasagna, Katie, that's what I want. Okay, so this meat sauce is looking done. So I'm gonna turn the heat off. And then we're gonna make our cheese layer. Okay, so the cheese layer is very simple. It's just 1 16-ounce container of cottage cheese. You could also do ricotta, but cottage cheese actually has a very similar taste. Same texture basically, and it makes a creamy cheese layer, and it is about half the fat and calories and higher in protein as well. And then we have 3/4 cup of Parmesan cheese. Okay, so now the fun part, we're gonna start layering the lasagna. And instead of the noodles, because remember, this is a noodleless lasagna, we have zucchini. And if you've ever made anything with zucchini before, you probably know it lets off a lot of water. So all you wanna do is you wanna bake it on a sheet pan while you're making your other layers for about 15 minutes, 425 degrees. And what that does is it cooks off a lot of that water before you add it to the lasagna. And so that way it won't make a really sloppy, wet lasagna. Then we're gonna have our meat sauce. And I'm gonna spread this on top of the zucchini, just like a typical lasagna. And you know, I take all of my favorite foods, and I've been doing this from the very beginning when I learned how to make all of my favorites in a healthier way. That was a huge part of my recovery when it came to how I viewed food. I really thought about food being something that can be a good thing that can nourish us, and we can even enjoy it. I always say that God gave us taste buds for a reason. There's nothing wrong with eating food that you enjoy. You don't have to eat dry, bland, boring food to eat healthy. And that looks perfect. And then we'll see if I can fit this meat sauce on top. This is a lot of veggies, so if you don't get them all in, that's okay. And then we'll do our shredded mozzarella. We have about a cup. You wanna kind of just cover it. in the mozzarella, and I'm gonna pop this in the oven, 425 degrees. I'm gonna cover it for 50 minutes, and then in the last 10 minutes, take the foil off, and that will get the cheese nice and golden brown. And coming up next, we're gonna make a chocolate strawberry frozen yogurt. You don't wanna miss it. There is a reason that the fitness industry is made up of a lot of different workouts, plans, and approaches to follow. Almost everyone wants a quick fix solution. However, there is no quick way to see lasting results. Rather, it is consistency and everyday choices to move towards a goal. Learn to pay attention to your body, move in a way that makes you feel energized, and look for ways to become the best version of you. Trade the short-term fads for the realistic daily choices, and you'll find results that last a lifetime. Coming up next, chocolate-covered strawberry frozen yogurt, ready in minutes. The perfect treat to curb your cravings. Okay, so we're finishing up with my chocolate-covered strawberry frozen yogurt. And for me, I personally think that ice cream should have its own food group because that's how much I love it. So if you guys understand what I'm talking about, then you will want to make this recipe and tuck it in your back pocket for whenever you have an ice cream craving. I'm gonna start off by just taking some Greek yogurt, just plain Greek yogurt, and add it to a blender. Then I have some frozen strawberries, and this is what makes it a strawberry frozen yogurt. And you do want to do frozen, so if you have fresh, you can just pop them into the freezer for a few hours, and this is what makes it the ice cream texture or consistency. Then I have some cocoa powder, and I'm going to do a 1/4 cup of cocoa powder. And then add sweetener to taste. So I'm going to do a few tablespoons of monk fruit sweetener. Then I have some almond milk here, and I'm going to add the almond milk just until it hits almost the top of my strawberries, and that way it'll blend smoothly. Then we're gonna put the top on and give this a nice blend. Okay, so that looks perfect. It's nice and smooth and thick, so it looks just like ice cream, absolutely delicious. And I remember when I first created this recipe in the very beginning of Dashing Dish, I was looking for something to hit those ice cream cravings in a healthy way because I was pretty much looking for some ice cream to have after every single dinner. And I knew that that would not be good and nourishing to my body every night. So I had to come up with a healthier way, and you can see that this is really good for you. It's fruit, it's some protein with that Greek yogurt. So these look delicious. If you wanted, you could pop one of these in the freezer and you can have it later. So you just take it out of the freezer about 2 hours before you have it, and it'll be perfect, almost like soft serve texture. And I'm gonna enjoy this one now. It'll be the perfect way to end the day. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed the journey with me, learning all about how Dashing Dish got started and how God turned my ashes into something beautiful. And the great news is He can do the exact same for you today. If you would like these wonderful recipes where Dashing Dish began, you can head over to the website at dashingdish.com, where you'll find recipes to nourish your body and soul. And the kids, all the picky husbands in your house, picky husbands, if you have multiple husbands, then you need to watch a different show, and you definitely need to think about what's really going on in your household.